Anyway, let's talk to Joanna Bell, political journalist. I don't know if you've ever been married, Joanna, but I mean, would you take your husband's name and give away the name Bell?
Definitely with my reputation. But,
Well,
um,
listen, well, you can say that. I mean, I couldn't possibly comment. Not for me to say. Let's get straight stuck into Broken Britain, front page of the Sun today. I think it's basically confirming the thing that everybody knows, which is that nothing really works. 66% of the people of this country think that the country is heading in the wrong direction.
well, it really, really is. I mean, it's not going in the right direction, is it, Mike?
It's certainly
Uh,
not.
there's talk about all the councils across the country going on strike and the bins not being collected because of what's happening in Birmingham. So it's really reached a critical level where there's got to be a watershed moment when this whole thing collapses.
Yeah. Well, this is what I've been saying ever since, the Labour government got in. And I never knew, and I always said, I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know what the tipping point is going to be. And it wasn't the economy. It wasn't the budget. It wasn't the small boats. But it's going to be something. It might be the bin strikes. It might be, whatever is the latest situation with the China syndrome with the British Steel plant up in Scunthorpe. But which area needs the most radical reform according to the survey that they did with Salvation? Immigration 32%, the NHS 31%. The NHS is still an absolute basket case, and the economy 18%. Those are the three big things that people care about.
I mean, of course, everybody wants money in their pocket. I do. It really is reaching a critical level where people don't have money anymore to go to the pub
Yeah.
or put food on the table. That's why reform are gaining such traction in the polls, because people just want change and they want the old band out and new ones in. But the problem is, I don't think that reform is going to replace the Conservative Party because they're too right-wing.
Right. Well, you never know. I mean, we've got local elections coming up, but what's striking in this poll as well is how big the Labour majority was. When you look back at the 2024 vote, it says Labour had 39% of the vote, the Conservatives 24%, the Reform only had 18%, but it now looks as though that's all changed. Labour in the current prediction for the local elections, 27%, with Reform on 30%. So Reform have literally, moved up 12%, and the Labour Party have moved down 12%. So it's a straight switch.
Well, it's,
So they're now taking, what I mean is by that, they're now taking votes away from Labour, not just from Tories.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. But you have to admit, like, their appeal is very narrow. They don't have the left, centre, or right people within Reform Party. So I can't really see how the British electorate are going to vote for them, especially without Rupert Lowe.
But isn't that the point, though? Because Rupert Lowe has caused, what you might have said was a rift in the party, but it doesn't seem to have affected their popularity. So Rupert Lowe perhaps has peeled away some of the people who are more on the right wing of that party, and he's left Reform as a much more sort of middle-of-the-road party who are now campaigning on issues like British Steel, campaigning on issues like immigration, but they're not campaigning on issues that, say, for example, the more right-wing section of Reform would be going for.
Well, that's it. But, like you said earlier, Labour had massive support at the polls and, they didn't maintain it. And it's the same thing that's going to happen with Reform. They're not going to be able to maintain that support because they just don't have the representatives to...
They haven't got the depth, have they? That's the thing. But they might have that. I mean, it's going to be very interesting what happens on May the 1st. I mean, again, the question, how will you vote if you have local elections this year? 29% Reform, 24% Conservative, Labour 20%. And I've been listening to a lot of Labourites who have said that they've never seen such hostility to a government on the doorstep as they try to canvass for them over the course of the coming weeks and what they've seen already. So, I mean, there's an awful lot of people who have turned against Labour. Many of them voted for them back in July.
Well, that could possibly be the reason why Keir Starmer is not handing the keys to Angela Rayner while he's away on holidays.
Absolutely. Well, I wouldn't give Angela Rayner the keys to anything. I mean, before you know it, she's moved in. Do you remember the story of when she went to see him one night and she was waiting for him for 5 minutes and she opened a bottle of scotch, which turned out to be an incredibly valuable bottle of scotch. It wasn't supposed to be opened, and she just poured herself a drink out of it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, look, it could happen to the best of us, but you know, that was his dead friend's whiskey. I think it was a bit dramatic, but I mean, leaving that to one side, Keir didn't even want her to be his PM. He was forced to put her in that position, and you know, I don't blame him for not trusting her with the keys because, you know, she is, you know, she's a loose cannon.
She is. That's the problem. But I'm told, and I was told this yesterday, that Starmer's still quite worried about the left wing of the Labour Party, which is represented largely by Angela Rayner and Ed Miliband, bizarrely. And Miliband's on the front pages of the Times today, basically saying that he's encouraging Chinese involvement in key parts of the UK's critical infrastructure, less than a month before the government wrested control of British Steel. We heard from all sorts of people in Labour government yesterday that British Steel must be recaptured from the Chinese because they've been behaving in what might be described as a very unethical way, trying to sabotage the company, trying to sabotage our energy. And yet Ed Miliband is getting into bed with these people saying, oh, don't worry, come and build a load of solar panels for us, come and build a load of wind farms for us. You know, it's dangerous, isn't it?
Well, Miliband was very naive in dealing with the Chinese over Scunthorpe. I mean, they literally bought it for £1, and then they tried to close it because they want to leave the UK totally reliant on Chinese steel. It's very smart, and it does make you think maybe this is why Donald Trump has imposed such high tariffs, because perhaps the Chinese are, you know, playing dirty tricks to dominate the markets.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt that that's what they're doing. But it's very unclear still whether this, you know, so-called rescue plan that's been launched by Labour is actually going to work. Because I had James Murray on here yesterday from the government, and he could not guarantee that the coal that's now coming from Japan on a ship is actually going to be delivered in time to keep the furnaces going. He was a bit cryptic about it. He said, "Oh, you know, we can tell you that it's very close to the plant, but he can't tell you exactly where it is. And as far as I know, it's still not there."
Well, so basically, you know, what you're talking about is 1970s style power cuts, bins on the road, no one picking it up. The only difference is that we have, you know, an influx of illegal immigrants to boot.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to make the 70s actually look like the 60s if it actually all kicks off, because I remember the 70s. I'm sure you're too young to remember it. But, you know, it was awful. It was ridiculous. We had no power for literally 22 hours of the day. We had 1 hour in the morning, so you could make breakfast, and 1 hour in the evening. The rest of the time, you were sitting around in candlelight with no heating on. Nothing.
Oh, it sounds awful. I mean, it could definitely, and it's definitely on the horizon again if Miliband has anything to do with it.
Well, exactly. I mean, Telegraph was saying today that the bin strike in Birmingham might just be the beginning. You know, they still haven't solved it. You know, they're now, I mean, they've been on strike basically more or less since the beginning of January. They've got rubbish piling up to the tune of something like 21,000 tonnes. Unite Union now saying that they might start similar strikes in Cambridgeshire, in Yorkshire, and already there's some Unite staff out on strike in Sheffield.
Well, look, you know, like I said earlier, it's going to happen across the country because you're dealing with, you know, the Equality Act, and Birmingham Council handled it completely wrong. And it's going to culminate in the knock-on effect that there's going to be, you know, trash all over Britain. Yeah. Like the 70s. And now,
we're not just talking about immigration either.
What's that?
I said we're not just talking about immigration either. Sorry, I couldn't resist that one. Yeah, I've got some breaking news for you. UK average, another lie from the Labour government, who keep telling us that, you know, earnings are outstripping inflation. Well, it turns out they're not now. UK average regular earnings growth decreased to 5.6% in the 3 months to February, and the rate of UK unemployment remains unchanged at 4.4%. So despite what Keir Starmer says every time he pops up with his sleeves rolled up, inflation is not being outstripped by people's wages.
Yeah, look, you know, the whole thing is an absolute disgrace. You know, they're talking about all these cuts, and, you know, at the end of the day, you've got the Speaker of the House spending 40 grand going on big holidays abroad. It just, none of it makes sense, Mike. You know, it doesn't make sense.
It really doesn't, and the Labour government don't seem to know how to get out of it. They don't seem to know how to solve one problem after another, which they're getting presented with.
Well, that's the thing, you know, and it really is. They've released their what was it, their pay?
Oh yes, the tax returns, yeah.
Exactly, the tax returns.
Which don't look right to me, I'm afraid.
Well, it doesn't, but they haven't shown, the expenses claimed or any of the tax reliefs applied. I want to see the full accounts
Yeah.
and to see what exactly we're dealing with here.
Well, exactly. I mean, it won't surprise you to know that I've got some of it in front of me here, and some of the registered interest that they've had to, put down on paper, which only doesn't even include their own personal expenses that they've claimed as MPs. But there's all sorts of donations, like one, for example, from David Sainsbury. This is to Rachel Reeves, 35,000 quid. Now,
Wow.
I don't know what she did with that. I'm sure she'll tell us that she spent it on some kind of, special event or something that she put on. But, there's no accounting for that kind of benefit. And clearly it is a benefit. And there's a whole load of them. 99,000, right, from Green Finance Institute Limited. Well, did you pay any tax on that? And should you have? Another one from David Sainsbury, 15,000. This is in 2024. Another one from FGS Global Limited comes in at 12,929 quid.
Wow.
A very odd number. But, there's hundreds of thousands of pounds swilling around in these people's bank accounts. And nobody knows whether it's taxable or what they're getting for it or what they're doing with it. And that, so the idea that they've released tax returns that say, oh, yeah, I paid £20,000 in income tax. Well, really? Did you? I mean, don't you think you should have paid a bit more?
Well, it just looks like, they're basically trying to protect themselves for when they leave office. So, David Cameron did it. George Osborne got a plum roll at BlackRock after he left government. So, it's obvious that they're taking this money in lieu of benefits when they get out of politics.
It would certainly seem that way. Listen, Joanna, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Joanna Bell, a political journalist there with a rundown of all the things that are part of broken Britain. UK regular average earnings growth decreased, as we just said, to 5.6%.